So it's probably on my end more than yours. Hey, folks, how you doing? Everybody all right? It's about 3 minutes still. Y'all just go ahead and act like Baptists. Y'all want to. Get ready to go, man? Getting that stuff together? Yeah, you got your first 6 months lined out? Okay. Okay. I just make it. So they just can't end it. So then you can sort of acclimate them to what it is here. Yeah, okay. Well, that's good. Enjoy that pastor was there so long. When I first started, I had to go to the year. I just enjoy it. They'll be busy. Yeah, that's good. Good. 45 seconds. On countdown. Got it? Yes, but I will repeat the question. Yes. That be good? Well, we can do both ways. I'll repeat the question. Then you can say about it. Okay. Okay. All right. But I'll do my best to repeat any questions they might have. Now, y'all over here, y'all gonna make me have to jerk around. Okay. Y'all are doing your part of social distancing, aren't you? Isn't that good? Yeah. That is great. I tell you what, that's something else. I got to hold my great grandbaby today. Well, I don't have to. I just stand out of the way and let my wife do it. Yes, do. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get this thing going. Is my mic on? Seems like it's on. The light says it's on. Okay, good enough. I do appreciate you coming. I know that it might not be in your schedule. I did request before I came to have 4 or 5 Sunday evenings to be able to address some things. And so tonight is not really addressing things. Tonight is more of a let's sort of get on the same page and know each other and stuff like that. I'll let you know a little bit more about where I think we're going as a transitional pastor. I asked the committee before I came to allow I don't know 6 weeks to 2 months to kind of get my feet on the ground and figure out things. During that time, I have done some things besides preach. Preaching is only a small part. It's not the major part of what this is about. About a transition pastorate or that. It is. I would say if there is a big goal for me, the big goal is to give your new pastor the best first year of ministry that he's ever had or ever will have. And that means that you got to work on two ends. We have to come to some consensus in preparation. And in that, I will do some things toward the end after it's announced that you're going to have a pastor to make his welcome good. We'll help you think through some things with that. When they come for their Actually, to begin their ministry, we will have a special service that will be organized by people in the church to make it a very special day where actually the mantle is handed off to them. And now, from that moment, then they're your pastor. But there's a lot of preparation that's going to go into the process. First week, I found the office. I met the secretary. I met your staff. I met with your staff. We had some conversation, just basic conversation about some different things. I came to know their families a little bit, and that takes a little bit of time. During that second week, I read through your constitution. I read through your financial reports. I read through your membership roll. Found some people I knew, some people I'd been their pastor for many number of years ago. But so went through that. I had sort of the thing organized a little bit where I could see who's a senior adult, who's a median adult, who has children, what the ages are, and different things like the median age and those kind of things. I've looked at some things with regard to your community, what your community is like, although I knew what it was like because I've been here in 3 different churches before this, and so I've done evaluations of segments of the population through Mission Insight and some other programs that we have. So I looked through some of that to sort of see what's there. Justin's done a good job in putting together some things we're going to look at in a short period of time. And one of them is a Pray and Go, and that sort of looks at who's around the church. We also looked at a little bit in terms of what the median income is, the racial profile in the area, 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, 5 miles around your church. How many people there are, what their ethnic background is, what their educational level is. And what you find with churches in Gaffney is basically that the churches don't necessarily match their community. You come with a certain educational background or a certain economic background, and that doesn't mean necessarily that everybody you're trying to reach has that same background or same thing. So finding common ground and finding out how to bridge that gap are things that we're going to do as we go through it. So I have looked at those things, sort of evaluated a little bit of them, for instance. We'll talk about this a little bit later. I'm not sure that there ever anything you could do about it at this particular time, but I would say over 80. I think I looked at 83% of all the money that comes into the church goes to either staff or facilities maintenance in some way, and then some programming and things like that. So in a way, it's typical. In another way, it's a little top heavy. In some ways, and those are important things to think about now, not necessarily to dwell on when a pastor comes, but just sort of for the church to understand where it is. This is what's called church conversation, and that's exactly what I want it to be. Now, here are the ground rules. We're not going to complain about anything you don't like in church tonight. We're not going to point anything at anybody else. And if you stand up and you say, "Well, if so and so over there had done this, we'd be," if you do that, you're out of order, and we'll have a police escort. No, I won't do that. That's not funny nowadays, though. No, we won't do that kind of thing. When I was growing up, I grew up on a semi-farm. We had about 30 acres, which was not a farm, but it's enough room to roam, especially when the neighbor has 75 and the other neighbor has 400, and then the neighbors across that all knew who you were, and you had free run of everything. So I could leave in the morning early and I'd just be home for supper. That's basically the way it was. I could ride a bicycle for a mile and a half to Joe Spearman's store and get me an ROC cola and a moon pie. And that's sort of the way I grew up. Things aren't that way anymore. Some of you can relate to that. You know what that kind of thing, that kind of situation is like. And there are people who are of a certain age in churches like Central Church and other churches that remember Gaffney that is a different Gaffney from the Gaffney that you have now. I remember the pulpit committee came and talked to me about coming to Providence, and I was just sort of joking because I'd heard something. And I said, "I hear Gaffney is a pretty rough place." He said, "No, O.C. Blackwood's the ones." I remember definitely. He said this. He said, "No, that's just stuff you heard." Well, he met me at the mailbox one day when I was moving in. And you know, you have the church, and then you have 3 sets of apartments down below the church. And while I'm standing at the mailbox with OC Blackwood, I hear 3 shots ring out, pow, 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 and I hear them go through the woods. And then I hear all kind of sirens and police going in and all that kind of stuff, and I think, this is a safe place. Sure, OC. But I found it's a delightful place, great people, wonderful people, because I relate to the background that people in this area have, and just have wonderful ministry and wonderful years and wonderful friends. And so some of you have long backgrounds, some of you have short backgrounds in this area, and we'll have to take that into consideration. We'll think about what you how you came to know about and come to Central Church. If it's typical of other places, I think it's well over 85% of people that join a church join because of some friend inviting them. And yet we put all the ministry on staff, and they aren't in touch with all those people. It's the people that really impact the growth of the church. So in our transition tonight, we're going to look at a few little things. And feel free to ask a question. I'm going to ask you some questions and ask you to respond. Don't feel on the spot about it. I'm not going to call your name because I would get it wrong. But I want you to feel relaxed enough to do that. But anyway, I grew up on a little farm, and my dad. I've always loved horses. Always loved horses. Had horses most of my life. I've been thrown off a horse 3 times. 2 times on concrete, which a horse will ride you 40 miles on plowed ground to get the chance to throw you off on concrete one time. And 2 times on concrete. One was with a big pony that I had, and I was going along behind my daddy, who had a big white horse named Snowball, and I was 6 years old. I remember, and so my dad always said, "You hold on to that horse. Don't you let that horse get away." Well, that horse took off out from under me and rolled me out on the road, and I was still holding on to him, and I held on to him about 100 yards, about all I could hold on to that horse on the pavement. Well, I'm telling you, I got up and I was skinned up all over. I had knots on my head, and I had skinned strawberries all over my legs and all over my back and stuff. Carried me to the doctor, which I didn't want to go there because I didn't like the smell of a doctor's office. And because that always said booster shots. Y'all know what I mean when they say booster shot? That means bend over, boy. And, I never did. Every time I bent over, I had this stinging sensation right there, And so I didn't want to do that. So it took me to the doctor, and the doctor looked at me and said, "I don't look too good." Well, I knew it didn't look too good. That's why I was there. And so he called his nurse in and said, we need to daub something all over him. And so they did. They smeared mercurochrome. Y'all know about what mercurochrome is? They smeared that stuff all over me. And I'm telling you, I went back red and white. I was like a Christmas tree. And my mama, boy, she started in on my dad. "JB, I told you not to have that boy on that horse." Well, I was scared to death of a horse for about the next 4 or 5 years. My daddy bought me 3 different ponies after that, and I wouldn't get around one. It scared me to death. Then I finally decided I wanted one when I was about 12 or 13. They bought me one called Shag, and he was a Palomino. It was a trigger, if you've ever seen one. Just beautiful Palomino with a flax mane and tail. And it became sort of like my dog more than my horse. It just took up with me, and I took up with it. And it just became a nuisance around, really, to tell you the truth. But it was a big old strong horse and all that. And then we sold that. I sort of got more interested in girls and more interested in cars and more interested in sports. Unfortunately, not too interested in study. So that's sort of how I went through high school. And then when I came I was up in my 40s. I started riding horses again. Got another horse, and I'm going someplace with this. I want you to sort of follow me. I got a horse named Katie. And I named him Katie because my grandson. I said, "What should I name this horse, Drew?" And he said, "I think you ought to call him Katie." Don't know where he got it in the world. So I said, "Okay, her name's Katie." Well, Katie had a mind of her own. She was a show horse. I mean, not show horse, but she was a rodeo horse. If y'all know anything about quarter horses and rodeo horse, she was what you call involved in 2 events. One was team penning, which you put a whole bunch of cows, and they got numbers, all different numbers in them. And you run your horse right in the middle of that, and you herd out all the horses, all the cows with number 6, and they time you on that, and so you really have to have a horse that can really do some stuff with that. So they're really quick. So that means when they spin around, if you're not ready to spin around, you're going to stay where you are, except you're going to drop straight down. And so she was that quick and that good. And she was also what you call a healer, which means that you have two cowboys come out of chutes, and you have a cow going in between them. And the lead cowboy ropes the head, and the healer ropes the heel, and they stretch it and let it lay down, and they time them on doing that. My daughter saw that happen one time, but it was a girls' event, and she came back to the rodeo, and I said, "Jennifer, did you like the rodeo?" She said, "No, I hated it." I said, "Why?" She said the girls got out there, and they didn't have but one goat, and every one of them roping the same goat. I said, "Really?" They said, "Yeah, not only that, but they go out there, and they got so used to being roped, they just go out there and lay down and wait on somebody to come and get her." So, anyway, Katie was that way. So I took Katie and I rode her. She was the best riding horse I ever had, best horse I have ever had. But she had a mind of her own. Okay, she's going where she wants to go. So I take her off on this ride, me and a couple of other guys, and you load them on a trailer and you take them someplace. I took them about 100 miles away, and we were on a ride. I got back, and I started loading on the trailer, and I stepped one step up on the trailer, and she jerked me off of the trailer. She said, "I ain't going on that trailer." Well, all the cowboys in the world couldn't put that horse on that trailer. We tried everything we could try. We put ropes around her rear end and tried to push her up. We tried to spook her up. We touched her with a broom. We did. You get in the front, I'll push, you pull. We did everything we could do. Finally, had to unload 4 horses, back 2 trailers up against one another, run her off, get her on a big trailer, put her, and then run her off one trailer onto the other. And finally got her home that way. So I carried her to the guy over at Buck's master's place, and I said, "Bo, she's great, but she's no good to me because I can't get her on the trailer." He said, "Well, let's see what we can do." So he just set up a little corral around the back of a trailer. He opened the door, put some water and a little bit of hay in there, and left the door of the trailer open, all sort of pinned in. And he said, "Let's go get some lunch." We went and get a hot dog over to the little store. When we come back, Katie was standing on the trailer. She saw me. I walked up to the fence. I was as far away from here to that back door. She looks at me. She steps off the trailer. She walks over to me. She turns around. She goes back. She gets on the trailer. Walks to the front of the trailer, turns around, comes back, walks off, walks over to me. Walks back again, gets on the trailer a third time, goes to the end of it, and backs herself all the way, the full length off of that trailer. Because she had such a mind of her own, she said, "I know what you wanted me to do. I just didn't want to do it, and I'll do it when I get good and ready." Well, that's the way we are, you see. We have minds of our own. God gave us sense, common sense, and no sense. And when you put us together and you group us together, you got some issues. The first issue is sensitivity to God. Now, Katie was 850, 900 pounds. You're not going to push them around, folks. You just can't bully a horse. That horse is going to do what it wants to do, and you better understand how to lead and not drive. For instance, she was so sensitive to things that she could stand right in front of me with her side, and if I'm going to try to push her over and get her, over that direction, she's not going to do it. She's just going to stand there because she knows I can't do it. But she had been trained. She had been trained to be so sensitive that I could take one little finger like this, and I could put it on her side. Now, some of you are ticklish, and that's not what I'm talking about. But I could put this finger on her side, and I could just go. And she'd step over. She was so sensitive to my touch. That told her that I wanted her to move, and she became sensitive to my touch and my command. Well, that's the way it is with us and God. And when we're in the church, we talk about evangelism or discipleship or church ministry and all the things that are involved in church that we've grown up with and we know. It all boils down to how sensitive we are to the touch of God. How open we are to hearing God, to listening to God, to knowing what God wants to do. So that when your committees come together and your groups start making big decisions that are going to affect 10 or 15 years down the road, that it is absolutely essential that the touch of God be on what they're doing. Now, those are things we're going to be addressing. Tonight, we're going to address some things in this conversation about the life of the local church. Now, I can give you a little overview of a couple of things we're going to do. Tonight, we're going to look at how many of you, back when it was really popular, took the course Experiencing God. Okay. It's probably been a long time ago. One of the things I discovered a lot of years ago, going to the um, various places to purchase these kind of things, I went to the Baptist bookstore, which was in Greenville. It's closed down. That was Lifeway after that, and now they're pretty well closed down. I don't think it exists anymore, does it? Lifeway? I don't think so. But anyway, I went to the back wall where special studies were, and I was just interested in seeing how many special studies we have to learn how to do different things. There were 92 different 8 to 12-week studies that churches were doing at that particular time, and more coming off the press from time to time. Interesting experience about Lifeway. Went there one time. Knew Cheryl Ponder, who worked there. She was a missionary's wife, a former missionary's wife. My wife said, "Does that first place work?" Y'all know when I talk about first place? Anybody remember first place? It's a weight loss thing. You know, you count your calories and count your food and your food groups and all that kind of stuff, and you lose weight. And they do. And so my wife just said, "Cheryl, does that work?" She said, "Well, if it worked, there wouldn't be a fat woman in the Southern Baptist Convention, because I'm telling you, it sells like crazy." I said, "Okay, I got the information I needed." But if you think about the number of special studies we have, we ought to all really be disciples, shouldn't we? We ought to know everything you can know about discipleship and the church life and the spiritual life and discipline and all those kind of things. The problem is we're putting that in our head. In some cases it gets to the heart, but in most cases we're just sort of putting it in our head. So tonight what we're going to do to start is we're going to take a look at a little bit of chapter 5 of Henry Blackaby's book, Experiencing God, and refresh your memory on a few things he said that were essential for us to understand. So let's just go on to our first slide real quick. The value, this is sort of what I've been introducing already, the value of transitional pastor, before I get to the things of Blackaby. Your local history is important. We're going to really look at it. Our next conversation, we are really going to look at your church history. And that's going to be from your eyes, not my eyes. I'm not going to lay out your history. You're going to lay out your history. Now, somehow, Justin, you guys may have to help me with this, but we may need to arrange somehow to do that in the gym. I don't know if there's a way to project anything there. Is there? Okay. If there is, because we do need to look at one little short video, but we may need to do it there because we're going to have tables and we're going to have people divided up, and you're going to think through every decade in the history of your church. That's really important next week. When I was at Cherokee Avenue, they had some things take place 25 years before we had our church conversation about that. And everything they were just talking about all kind of great things happening, great things, this and this and this. And I came to a certain decade, and they just grew dead silent. I just lay there for a little while, and somebody finally said, "Well, that's when the split happened." And they came to understand that they had lost their desire to live when that happened. And when they came out of that time, after we worked through that thing, they came out, and I don't know how many people told me the same thing. They said, "I think we decided tonight we want to live." So you see, things can happen in church life that take the heart and life out of it. And if you don't deal with it, those kind of things can come up again. So we're going to look at your church history. We can do it unbiased from my position because I don't know anything about it. I don't know who said what or who did what. I don't know where the landmines are and stuff like that. You know who said what and who did what. And we're not going to get into who said what and who did what. What we're going to get into is what that time period had, what kind of effect that had on the life of the church. We're also going to look at your systems and your traditions and your practices and where they came from and what you like and what you, not necessarily what you don't like, but what you're more comfortable with and less comfortable with and those kind of things, just so that you know as you're looking toward the future what you want to do. We're going to look at your leadership, your programs, your budgets, your policies, and all that kind of stuff just briefly. And also part of our goal is to assist the pastor selection committee. They've got a big task. I don't know a name they have. I won't ever know a name that they have until they come back and say, hey, this is a person we're wanting to bring to our church as a candidate for pastor. I've recommended some people, but I didn't know who I recommended from time to time. I had a pastor call me and say, I've got somebody I want to recommend to your church. Is it too late? I said, I don't know. I didn't ask who it was. I said, put their resume and information in an envelope, seal it up, give it to me, or send it to me, and I'll pass it on to the committee. I don't want to know anything about it. So we can be totally unbiased about everything that is there, and that's how we're going to work. How many of you have been members at Central Church for over 20 years? One? I'm sorry? 5 years old? Uh-huh. Okay. So you're the only one that's been, is that right? You're the only person who's been here 20 years? Oh, okay, yeah, okay. You must have been born and brought. Okay. Okay, so what are your memories from 5 years old? Do you remember much about it? Okay, let me make sure the people online hear this. They had hickory bushes on the side of the door. I wonder who, in their strategic planning, put those there. Did you ever have, let me ask you this, did you ever have to go out and get one? Boy, when you're a child in church, you really have some memories. I remember vividly one day on a Sunday afternoon being chased round and round one of those fold up. You had a high chair that folded into an ironing board. Y'all remember those? Yeah, that solid old wood thing is painted, probably been painted 3 or 4 times. I remember going around that thing. My daddy chasing me around it with a belt. Just because I innocently stood up in the middle of the sermon with one of those funeral home fans and flew it across the congregation and said, here comes a helicopter. Now, I don't see any harm in that, do you? I learned to respect church. I never did that again in church, I can tell you that. And I was probably 4 years old or 5 years old. I vividly remember that day. Well, we do have memories about that. But when you joined this church, did you join because somebody invited you, or because you heard about something taking place at the church, or because you married into it? I knew I'd get one. Married into it. Okay. You were invited? Okay. Google. Wait, who said Google? Oh, you Googled your way in, huh? Well, I tell you, I don't know if that's going to pass muster in heaven or not. I never heard of St. Peter. I never heard of that, but you better get used to Googling. Okay. Okay. And you found one close, didn't you? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Came for the youth ministry. Did you enjoy it? Okay, great. Okay. You went with a mission trip. Okay. Y'all, your family's at like First Baptist. Where? Yeah. I was thinking so. Okay. Who else? Who came because somebody wanted you to come? Somebody else invited you. Who came because you heard the pastor was such a great preacher? Uh-oh. Okay. Well, most people don't come because it's a great preacher, but it's okay, Stephen. We can still create credit for him coming, can't we? We can think that. They'll let us think that. Yeah. Okay. How many of you have been through both highs and lows in your experience as part of this church? Okay. Sometimes weren't so pleasant. Sometimes were very pleasant and great memories. But all the way through it, you develop relationships. How many of you feel like through the downs you have a better relationship with some people than you would have had without them? You ever feel that way? Yeah, that's sort of part of it. I wouldn't say on a scale of 1 to 10, but how would you rate the friendliness of Central Baptist Church? Huh? I'm being honest. Tell me. It's okay. It's okay. 4, 5. 1 to 10. Okay, one to 10, 5. Let's give us the benefit of the doubt. Every church I've ever gone in is, in their opinion, the friendliest church in town, and they are to each other. But it's always hard to break into the group, and always hard to sort of break that. So as a guest, you just have to take the initiative sometimes to work through it. I'm a member of a very largest church I've ever been. Well, no, I was a member of First Baptist Columbia. They had really, really worked on that thing, and their small groups just dynamite. I mean, they have really used their Sunday school or their whatever you want to call it, connection classes or whatever you want to do. And that was where you really were ministered to, and just really felt at home and had great relationships built. Just it was the most unusual situation I'd ever had. I visited my church when we were looking for a church, and for a pastor or a staff member, when you start and you don't have that responsibility as being on staff, and you start looking for a church to go to, boy, that's really an experience, because you never had to look for a church before, and all of a sudden you're having to do that, and you just see everything so much differently than you did before. So that just a lot of things about that, but those are things that we talk about as we go through this to sort of work on a little bit. A lot of people do. I mean, they'll have people with umbrellas out in the parking lot, helping people in when it's raining, and that's a good thing. Those are really good things to do. But it is really in the developing of relationships with people that churches really shine. And the deeper the relational capital of a church, the more impactful that church will really be. Can you really open yourself up to have a relationship with someone that you've only recently met? That's tough to do at school, isn't it? Those of you teachers, your kids go. I remember when I was in the 1st through 5th grade. I was just in the class like everybody else, and I made okay grades. And my parents finished elementary school. That's as far as my mother went to 11th grade. My dad finished 3rd grade, and he worked hard, and he became a supervisor in the mill and all that kind of stuff. And he always, he always said get an education, but they both worked the 3rd shift, and so I would have my own room and that kind of stuff, and I could go in, and they would say, "Son, you got your homework?" "Yeah." "No." And went through the 6th grade. And I remember coming back to school in the 7th grade. That's when you went into junior high. And I remember coming back from summer, and 2 things happened. One is all the boys had discovered girls. And I guess there's something missing in my life. I was spending summer fishing and stuff. But they discovered girls, and they were holding hands and all this kind of stuff. So I had shock there. And then I found out that I was now in the slow class. And you know the bad thing about that? I believed it. And I went all the way through high school thinking I couldn't do it. And so what's the use? So I played sports, and I did all the things that you'd do. I learned how to change a D into a B on a report card. I'm making good grades. And I learned how to fake a lot of stuff. And I came to my senior English class, and we had to do speeches. And I did a 10-minute speech. And it was a funny sort of thing. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was really acting out some things. And my English senior English teacher, called me aside after class, And I remember she pointed her finger at me and she said, I'm going to tell you something. From here on out, you're going to do excellent work in my class because you're not dumb. And she said, I believe you can go to college. I hadn't even thought about going to college. Imagine that, a kid my age in Vietnam going 100%. And I wasn't even thinking about Vietnam or going to college, either one. And she said, I'll help you with an application. I'll help you get in. Because she said, I believe in you. That one person in that school, those other two teachers, she changed my entire life. Went back to my 50th high school reunion last year. I was on program as Dr. Ronnie, and I know they were trying to figure out which Ronnie are they talking about here. This is not the one I knew. But just that inspiration. And you know, that's something about churches. Churches learn to inspire, don't they? And that's a part of what you do and what you learn to do. You learn to be inspirational and to make people better. Not just know more, but to be better at their Christian life and their walk and their discipline. And that's discipleship. That's discipleship from Stephen working with kids and young people to having the class with the choir, not choir, it's a bad word, I guess, but with the group that you have, the praise band and others, to Sunday school class, to the men's group, to the women meeting at other times. Men are going to go into Romans. Pray for them. Man, I can't imagine getting past chapter 1. But they're going to do it. And those are things that bind you together. You struggle financially over something as a church. You come together, okay, we're going to have to get a handle on this and do it, and you start struggling together and working together, and you get closer. Those are things we'll look a little bit about. All right, let's do this quick review of experiencing God. God is always at work around you. In what ways does anybody see God at work around us today? Anybody got anything? I know this is spontaneous. Anything you think of, you can see it. That's actually God working. Specific prayers? Did you say? Is it okay? Did you see some change? Did you see some change somewhere as a result of it in something? Okay. How's God working in Central Church? I mean, this is transition time. This is interim time. You don't have a pastor, so I guess we have to just sort of put everything on hold and sort of idle until we. But how's God working now? That's what you call suffering for Jesus in prayer at the beach. Yeah. Okay. In between songs. I think one of the things that sometimes we let slip with our churches and with our family as well is times to just talk about stuff in general. It doesn't have to be really serious stuff, just time to talk about stuff. My dad was 33 when I was born, so he was gray-headed by the time I was in high school, and so he didn't attend some of the things I was involved in, I'm sure because people would ask him, is this your grandson? And it was an embarrassing thing. That's just, it's just bad sort of stuff. But, my dad had a chicken house. I grew up with 4,000 chickens, and so I learned how to shovel early. And I learned what a hot August night could do to you with the wind blowing in your direction from 2,000 or 4,000 chickens. But he turned that into just an old barn where he kept the horse and stuff, and then the horses were gone, and my dad just go in there and sit. And I learned a lot of lessons by just talking to my dad talking to me. I remember one of my jobs was split wood. Every time I came home, he'd have wood cut up, and I'd have to come home and I'd have to split wood. I'd set it up, and I had used what's called a go devil, and I'd And I learned how to set up three and just go pop, 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 and all three of them pop into it. I learned not to do sweet gum. A lot of those little lessons. But I learned one great lesson one day. Daddy's sitting in his lounge chair down at the barn. I'm going to split some wood, and I can't find my wedge. It's a little metal wedge about that wide that tapers off, and you put it, you get it started, and then you really hammer down on it, and it splits the wood. And I couldn't find it. Well, I went back and I looked everywhere for that wedge. I couldn't find it, and I couldn't burst this thing with just the Go Devil I had because it just stick in it. And so my dad's just sitting there, just letting me do what I'm going to do, and I found this little chisel about that big around. And I figured, this will do it just like the other. And it was tapered just like that. So I have to get that thing, and I put that on the top of this thing, and I go tink, 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 and I get it where it'll stand up. And then I'm coming roundhouse with this thing. Bam! And I hit that thing. It came back, hit me right in the mouth. I'm staggering around that piece of wood. My dad's sitting in the chair looking at me, and he says what he always said, "Son, you be all right." Every time he said that, I was hurting. Every time he said it. So we learned a lot of things just sitting around talking, and he would talk about, he would never ask me serious questions, but he just let me talk, and I'd tell him what's going on in my life. And a lot of times we just need to be able to have those times where we can just talk about stuff. Talk about what your life is like, what's going on in your life, what's going on in mine, what I'd like you to pray with me about. Not just get real serious about everything, but just understand that people are just people. And when you put them all together, it's church. And the church has to move in a direction, and sometimes that's a little bit tough to do. So God is always at work around you. He's working in your family. You don't see it sometimes. You pray for your family. You're concerned about them. Some of you have small kids, and I tell you what, they're just as precious as they can be right now, but they're going to be teenagers one day, and something happens to the brain. I don't know what it is. Of both parents and kids. And fear begins to set in, and panic begins to set in, and you can say, I'm praying for my children, I trust God with my children, I trust God with my children until 11 o'clock. After that, I didn't trust them too much. And it was iffy before that. And so we've all got our concerns and cares. Did you know that a pastor, you call a pastor here to be that's middle-aged? Let's say he's 42 years old. You know what you're going to get? You're going to get a pastor, 42 years old, who feels like that the better part of a lot of their energy and ministry is in the past, and they're no longer on the top of the resume stack on all these churches, and they're no longer wanted as much as they were when they were 28 or 30 or 35. Plus, their kids are hitting adolescence and starting some rebellious stuff against the church, against the family, against all your standards and all your values, because they're hearing things that they're not hearing at home in other places. And so while you're going through the crisis of identity as a pastor, you're also going through the crisis of family, and your whole world seems to be falling apart, and you're trying to pastor church, and the church never sees any of it. Now, why is that important to know? Because you're likely going to call somebody about that age. I'm just guessing. And they're going to bring that with them. And they're going to bring their fears and their family things. And believe it or not, preachers don't always marry into the best of families either. You can have an extended family. You can have a reunion. And you can be scared to death something's going to happen during a reunion, because you always got that one who's going to do something crazy or say something out of the way to somebody and make somebody mad, and everybody's going to be all upset. You know what? Even pastors, even church leaders have difficulties in their own personal life. So just kind of keep that in mind. But God is working. God's working in your committee now to lead them to a person. God's going to be working in this church to prepare the hearts of the people in the church. Second thing he says is God pursues a continuing love relationship with you that is real and personal. So that tells you that God is pursuing you. You don't necessarily always take the initiative. He's taking the initiative with you. All of y'all remember when you became a Christian, when you were saved. I'm sure you probably, some of you were so small, so young, probably you don't remember much about it. You say, what could I have understood? And it's caused you to doubt a lot of stuff. Some of you were older in your life when you became a believer. But Things always don't continue the way they started as a believer. You start with a lot of excitement, and boy, it's just, oh man, this is, and then it starts to wane in your life a little bit, and you start to doubt stuff, and then you begin to see things that disappoint you a little bit in church life. Any of you ever been really disappointed with somebody that you really respected and loved in church? What did it do to you? I mean, man, it devastated you. I mean, you just couldn't, because you idealize those people as special people. And they are special people, but they're the emphasis on people. God invites you to become involved with Him in His work. What is God's desire for a church like Central, in a town like Gaffney, in a world like ours? What could God possibly want to do with a group of people like this? Is it so important? You think it is? Think it isn't? Yeah. So He would want it to be unified. He would want it to be pulling together. He would want it to be prepared for a new pastor, moving in a good direction. So He's working. He's working in individuals' lives. He's working in people's lives. One of the things Stephen's going to battle with, like all of us do, is response. You're gonna in your evaluate your performance on a Sunday. Boy, it's a liberating day when you realize as a pastor that you're not a performer. You're not supposed to be a performer. You're not supposed to be entertaining. These conversations are not supposed to be just entertaining. They're going to be light, that's fine, but they're not intended to do that. That feeling is not what we really want to accomplish. What we really want to accomplish is an understanding that whether we have certain leadership or don't have that leadership, God is never hindered by that. That God doesn't really have to have us. He can do anything He wants to do without us, but He chooses to involve us in His work. And when I surrendered to preach when I was 23 years old, and I didn't know what that was going to be involved, but I told the senior adults, I bought 2 suits when I surrendered to preach. One was a burgundy one, and I called it my clown suit because it sort of looked like a clown. This was back in the 70s. And they asked me the question. Y'all know what question they asked me? About my dress in 1970s? What did they ask me? Did I wear a leisure suit? I had a light blue one. I had the big collar and the flowery shirt, and I'm telling you, white shoes, and I was styling big time. John Travolta ain't got nothing on me except moves. But I'd stand in front of the mirror, Stephen, and I would preach. And man, I was Billy Graham, buddy. I'm telling you, I was giving it to him. And you have all these dreams about all kinds of things you're going to be. And God isn't working in that. He lets you do it. And I suppose if each of us have 2 guardian angels, they get together and say, hey, St. Peter, you got to come see this. This is the guy you got me in charge of. Well, that's just sort of the learning curve for ministry. But even in those years of my life when it was, iffy, when I had that emotional baggage and I had, I did understand the seriousness of what it means to speak for God. I think sometimes I understood it better then than I understand it now, maybe. But when you say you're speaking for God, it's a pretty serious matter. And so you got to keep the main things the main things. Is the happiest part of your marriage when you got everything you ever dreamed of having? Or when you had nothing and you were struggling and dreaming? Think about it. Boy, it's those struggles of you two together. And I remember we lost our little boy, Jeremy, at 18 days old. He had spinal meningitis and died. And that was really devastating. And we were, you know, my wife wasn't even 20. I was 22 or 23. And you don't think about some things until you face it. And when you have to go in a room you've spent 6 months fixing up and painting and putting things on the walls and putting together furniture and then have to take it down, you grow up in a hurry. Kay especially had a tough time with it. I had a really tough time. I prayed, I asked. I knew he was going to the hospital. I didn't know what it was, and I remember weeping and praying and crying, going down the road to the hospital, saying, "Please don't take my baby. God, please don't take my baby. Please don't take my baby." God took my baby. But God also provided a message, prepared a heart. And my baby's okay. I had 2 more. I held a great-grandbaby today. And sometimes the painful experiences in our life, we say, how can I avoid that pain? And we're conditioned to do that, aren't we? We're conditioned to avoid pain at all costs. We don't, and we try to help people. Let me help you get over this pain. Let me help you not have that pain. When God is working even through the pain. And there's some things He perhaps couldn't do unless He's working through that pain. And there are people in your church that are going through those kind of things all the time. Just all the time. So that you never know who you're preaching to, Stephen. You just never know who's going to be going through what. What happened Saturday night that has just blown a hole in a person's life. And yet, the message you prepared, God puts together with the heart that He's prepared, and He does what He wants to do. So God invites us to be involved with Him in His work. And that's what Central is all about. Being involved with God in this community. Would you say Central Church is heavier on evangelism, discipleship, fellowship, or ministry? Traditionally, just over the years, would you say it's heaviest? Would somebody dare say, I really believe, knowing this church, that we are heavier in this area than in that area? Evangelism, discipleship, ministry, and what was the other one? Fellowship. What would you say? Let's do it this way. Let's say, what would you say it has been traditionally? And what would you say it is now? Where's it heaviest? Somebody tell me. Did I hear something? The discipleship? What do y'all think? Now, every church isn't going to be really strong in all of them, I don't think. I mean, there may be some that are doing really good things in all of them, but I'm not sure it would be the strongest point of that church. Is it okay for a church to have a stronger emphasis in one area than it does in others? Is that all right? Okay. Who decides that? You do. Yeah. God does in one way, but you do. You decide what your strengths are going to be, what your focus is going to be. I came out of a leadership meeting last week with. We came out with five things that are going to be a focus for Central Church for the next 6 or 8 months if we're here that long. And we're going to not only promote those, but we're actually going to engage in those. We're not going to just talk about them or say, wouldn't it be nice if? We're going to move in those directions. And that's deliberate and intentional, and there's nothing wrong with you planning it, but you are going to have strengths in one area and you don't have strengths in another area. That's why Paul said, preach the word to Timothy. He said, preach the word. He says, do the work of an evangelist, knowing that he was not naturally inclined to be an evangelist. He had to make himself do some things. For instance, if you strengthen your relationships, your fellowship in your church, one of the things really handicapping us right now as a church or all churches is that we don't have the opportunity to get together like you did at one time, to get together and have a covered dish thing where you can uncover the green beans and the mystery meat or whatever it is, and you can partake of that. That's the second Lord's Supper, the fourth sacrament, third sacrament of the church, I guess, covered dish dinner. That's how they know where Baptists are in heaven. It's the place where they have covered dishes, and I guess that's probably true. But we can't. You don't have those kind of things right now. So you're not sitting around the table talking to each other. You're not. The small groups are not there right now. We are talking about, with your leadership team, specifically relaunching those small groups for the benefit of fellowship. Now you're doing some of it in your men's group and your ladies groups. That's part of it. But there were some great things in that which enhance fellowship. So you know what your strengths are and your weaknesses are. You get a new job, they want to find out what your strengths are and your weaknesses are. You have to take a test sometimes, or you have to do a personality profile, or you have to do a strengths finder or something of that nature, and find out whether you're empathetic or whether you're aggressive in some ways, what your personality is like, whether you have a melancholic personality or whether you have an outgoing personality, and in working out of that. But there's exceptions to all that. Some of you are HR people, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. You have to find out where people's strengths are and use them in those strengths. But what if God's calling you to work in an area that's not your strength? Then you got a real conflict, haven't you? That's the difference between the church and the secular world. You can put people in where their strengths are in the world. You can rarely do it effectively in the church because God may be calling them to something that is not their strength because He wants to develop that strength in them. When we talk about relationships, and we're going to have some really serious talk about how to develop relationships with people, because you reach people out of relationships, and if you can't build relationships, you can't reach people. And so how do you go, and I do it all the time, in apartments and things like that, how do you take people who are with one another all the time, and they're having fellowship with each other, and they love each other, and they talk about how great and close the church is, and then I throw them in an apartment community where they don't know anybody, and they're not to talk to each other all the time and hang out with each other. They're to interact with other people. How do they initiate a conversation with somebody that they don't know? Because if you don't, you stand around. You won't accomplish anything, and you've just wasted the food and the hot dogs and the weenies and all that kind of stuff's gone to waste. You really haven't accomplished anything. We're good at doing that kind of thing too, by the way, at providing the stuff without carrying it on into relationships. And that's sort of what we're going to look at as we look at relationships. But God speaks by His Holy Spirit through the Bible and prayer and circumstances in the church, reveals Himself and His purposes and ways to us. That's a tenet of what Blackaby said that you probably have looked at. Let's do the others real quick. God's invitation for you to work with Him always leads to a crisis of belief. There's what I was talking about a minute ago. That God may call you into an area that's uncomfortable to you. At that time of year when the dreaded nominating committee is working and you see one of them coming and you think immediately about the fact that you're keeping the kids this time and you're working with this group at this time and you help them with the fellowships over here and you carrying the meals to the sick over there and I don't have time to do anything. Besides, this is my gift. Well, you may avoid a challenge from God to put down things that are easy for you to do and take up some things that are difficult for you to do. I don't like that kind of thing. I don't think anybody does. I've never been a very pushy person. As far as evangelism is concerned, I have carried people through 4 spiritual laws and the CWT, that monstrosity we learned years ago. If you died today, do you know you spend eternity in heaven with Jesus? And then I've had people say to me, there was somebody here last week, they said that exact same thing to me. And I began to realize it doesn't work just memorizing something and throwing it out at people and being abrasive to them. You got to learn to talk to them and to understand them and to hear them and listen to them. And that's just part of it. God makes me uncomfortable with some things sometimes. The pray and go is going to be uncomfortable with some of you folks. Not uncomfortable with me because I've been doing it for 25, 30 years, just going into places where I didn't know anybody. Nobody. And where they look at you like, are you from the FBI? Took two people from, when I was working at the convention, we had a big training thing, and they wanted me to take two people into an apartment community, and we didn't know where it was or what it was. They told us where it was. They didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody. I carried Bill Wright, who was an associate in the Lexington Baptist Association, and the guy who is at First Baptist Landrum now. Those were the two people I carried. They were dressed in suits and ties. I was dressed just very casually. Well, when we went in that community, we were the only two white folks in that community. And when you were wearing a suit down the middle, we were just going prayer walk in that community. And when you were wearing a suit down the middle of the apartment complex, which was really the projects I'm talking about, it was kind of a rough area. I didn't know it at the time, but it was. And we're just praying for people. People come out and stick their head out their apartment, and they look to see who these dudes are with these coats and ties. And they ain't thinking we're preachers that are coming in there to evangelize. They're thinking somebody's about to get picked up. So these two guys are sweating bullets, and I'm just going down through there talking to people and just laughing with them and cutting up. And I go straight to them and say, "Hey, man, how you doing?" I'm doing it. One guy came out of his apartment. He was lickety-split coming out of the apartment. I don't know where he was going, but he was headed out. And I remember he was wearing white tennis shoes. And he hit the middle of that street, and he saw these three guys, and two of them had suits and ties on, and he skidded to a halt, and I saw the sparks. I went straight to him. These other guys thought, we're going to get killed. We're going to get killed. So I go straight to him. I said, "Hey, man, how you doing? I bet you think we're policemen or something." He said, "Well, I don't know. Are you?" I said, "No. We're just some pastors. We're just praying for this community." He said, "You know, my wife's about to have dialysis. You reckon you can pray for my wife?" We went over there and prayed for her, and we prayed for several other people. Had a good ministry and good relationship there. But if I didn't go to those people and just let them react, then you're not going to have any impact. So it's comfortable to me. But that's going to be uncomfortable to some of you when we sort of get into that as we look at engaging people within a mile of this church, a half mile of this church, or 100 yards of this church, lots of people. But you got to adjust your life. That's what Blackaby says. Adjust your life to join God in what God's doing. And then finally he says you come to know God by experience as you obey Him, and He accomplishes His will through you. So you know more about God by what God's doing. Now, we're in stage one. And I'm gonna wind this thing down in 3 minutes now. But we're in stage one. We have 5 stages we're going to go through and talk about. We're very general tonight. We just some little bit of back and forth, not really getting into a lot of things. We're going to build each time into some things. We're going to serve as facilitators to look at church history as a part of the kingdom of God. We're going to understand that when you look at your church history, that Satan doesn't want you to be successful. That's Revelation 2 and 3. I know that you were drinking out of a fire hydrant this morning as I was trying to throw stuff out about some things about history, all to just help us understand God's always working with the church. He's always used the church in culture. And yet, when you think about things that have changed our culture in the last 50 years, you think seismic changes of a magnitude that could not have been imagined by your mothers or fathers, grandparents. Changes that made it very dangerous, that have lined up with biblical prophecy. For instance, I saw where one of the agenda items that's coming along is going to be reducing the amount of meat that we eat. It's going to put a lot of McDonald's workers out of business, I guess. It's going to put a lot of farmers out of business. And we're going to go to eating veggie burgers. I guess. But I think about what the Bible says. Bible says in the last days these things would happen, and one of them is commanding that they abstain from eating meats. It's kind of strange, isn't it, that you're being led right down, forbidding to marry, and commanding to abstain from eating meats and things like that. So, a lot of things happening that have changed the culture, and as we deal with these things, we'll understand more about how Central fits in God's kingdom here, and how we prepare for a momentum shift in the life of the church. And so just this being introductory, sort of laying stage of what we do, thinking a little bit about church life, church history, leads into our church memories workshop, where we're going to try to do it in the gym around tables. We're going to have a big thing around the walls where you're going to have the opportunity to share your best memories of the church and your worst memories, the people that impacted you and influenced you the most in this church, and the turning points that took place in life, in your life, in the life of the church. We're going to look at every decade, and then we're going to look at the future and start moving from there. Okay, how do we get ready for a new pastor now? How do we get ourselves set? How do we get everything put into place so that he doesn't have to rearrange or upend things to really lead us? And so that's where we are. I do thank you for coming. I had this one intentionally sort of condensed a little bit and more monologue than dialogue. But as we get into our next special session, the Church Memories Workshop, is almost all dialogue. It's you telling me what you've talked about together in groups and expressing who you are and where you want to go as a church. It's a real turning point. So I thank you for coming tonight. When Calls the Heart comes on after a while, I guess that's my wife will have me watching that, and so I'll give you time to do that. Thank you for coming tonight. I want to say something real special to our friends over here. You were so good tonight. Thank you. Yeah, you were just so good tonight. Yeah, now go home and cut up. No, don't do that. But have fun. Okay, you got to go to sleep because you got to go to school and all that kind of stuff. All right, I know you got big things tomorrow. Any prayer requests you have tonight? Special prayer request. I believe Brittany's stepfather is in Rock Hill. His name is Terry. Terry, could I share? He has MRSA. I don't know if you've ever encountered that, but that is a really serious thing. So let's pray for Terry. All right? Tristan. Okay, I'm not aware, but you can clue me in. Okay. Any other prayer requests? Okay. I know Sonia. I knew Dean and what was her name? Jackie. Yeah. Sonia. Is there a Sonia here? Was Sonia Scruggs? Y'all know what I'm talking about? Well, that's a good reason not to be here. She was also a member of Providence years ago, and I haven't picked her out yet. I don't know where she was, if she had been here. But let's pray for her then. Anybody else? Pray for Ashley and those starting that new business and all that kind of stuff. They're really pressed right now. Vacation Bible School leadership, that we're working on that right now. I'll be praying for that. That's one of our big emphases. It's going to come up. I'll be praying for that. Pray for Stephen and Brittany and their family as they make their trip up to almost to the North Pole. You're right on the edge of Erie. Is it Erie? It gets windy up there, cold up there. Snowed this week. Okay. So let's pray for them. Just we want to have a special time before they leave to sort of recommission and give them our blessings as a church before they go. God will just give them a great ministry, great life. And pray for the young people in this church. Appreciate the young people coming. Why the whole church? I really wanted, because young people are not, people say things like, those young people are leaders of the future. Those young people are part of the church now. Okay? And we want them to know we love them. And they're involved. We want them to be involved in what we talk about and what we do as a church. So thank you for the coming. The little ones and all that, a real part of it. Let's pray together tonight. Father, it's with hearts that overflow with gratitude to you that we come to the throne of grace. We need you. We're living in a time that we never dreamed would come. We need you. We need a spiritual awakening. We need a revival in the heart of your people. Lord, we need to be able to stand the test of this generation and this time, which may prove to be very costly. We need wisdom for leaders, not in this church only, but in all of our churches, to guide our churches to know how to respond to a Daniel-like situation with grace, dignity, and to be firm. Give us strength to speak the truth, even to power. Give us patience and understanding to know why people react the way they do and believe the things they believe. Father, bless the young people in this church and the children as they're growing up to face things that maybe we've never faced. Give them strength and courage and give them spiritual wisdom. Protect them. Father, I pray that as we prepare for a new pastor at Central Church, that we would know and understand that you have a special place for it. And that's a special person and family who are going to be brought in, and that we need to do everything we can to be totally prepared for that new leader to come in and lead this body of believers. Father, I pray that you'd prepare every thought, everything, and bring it under submission to Christ. And may we grow to love one another deeper. And when that pastor steps in that pulpit for the first time, he senses a people that really love Jesus and really love each other. We can't ask you for any more than that. And we know that that'll do. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for coming out tonight.